Panic attacks. Okay, I guess everything is alright. I'm just looking at this right here. It's at a different angle, and I don't understand the angles. But it seems like I have to look like right here, even though it's here. So, because like when I'm looking here, I got to figure that out. It's really interesting. I wish I knew more about angles and stuff. But if I look like right here, it makes you think that I'm looking over here. But if I like talk here, so I'm gonna have to talk to you here. So that's really interesting for me. Anyway, this one right here is gonna be, which I stated before, is gonna be on panic attacks. My panic attacks. Um, I did want to say something about update. I wanted to mention a little bit of update about about Dance Without Music. Um, I don't want to mention too much because this is about panic attacks, and that one is totally, it's such a world in itself. The Dance Without Music now, it's going splendidly. I guess I can say that. The only thing I want to say is the next one I have the Expert 3, which is gonna finish with Expert 3C. Okay, that's all of the threes. That one's gonna be on force. And I just want to say this. I was gonna make, as far as categories and things like that is concerned, it's not the topics. The topics, as far as the topics that we go over in Dance Without Music, are so big, and it's surprising to mention to you. And I say this because we're getting ready to go into force, and force showed me that force in itself is a category, which shows me, and I want to show you that the Dance Without Music, as far as balance is concerned, balance itself, because of the things that I've learned, or the things that I'm going to express in force, which is going to be Expert 3C. It's force is so it's a category in itself, because when I was making, I told you these, each YouTube, as far as these topics that are concerned, they are it takes about 100 hours. But this one I couldn't taper. Force, I could not taper. I could not taper into something to where you would feel as if you know everything, as if you got a handle on it. Okay, because we talked about balance, we talked about energy, we talked, I mean, we have a video on balance, energy, um, weight, the control. um, After we did the control, we went into we tension, pressure. All of those things are categories, but when I did them, as far as Dance Without Music is concerned, it was easy for me to show you as if those topics are basic, okay, even though they're not. But when I got up to force, it was like I can't do anything basic with it. So I have to show, I have to honestly tell you that it is a category within itself. So when we go over force, it's going to be a category, and in that category we have subtopics, I guess, if you can follow it, as far as that's concerned, because there's so many different kinds of there's so many different kinds. I don't like to use plural, because it makes things a little bit more complicated to conceive. So force has so many different types that, and they connect to the other things that we talked about. So the reason why I'm explaining this to you now is when we get into force, we're going to talk about specific things that force can be related to, as far as the basics of this. I have to say basics of this, of these expert courses. Okay, as it relates to Dance Without Music. So what I'm exposing to you is that the topics that we went over are not small topics. I made them appear that they were small because it's so that we can go along as if we know how to handle each topic, if you understand what I'm trying to relate to you. The only thing I'm trying to say is we got to a point, which is expert 3C, which is going to discuss to you the basics of force. But because force is so detailed and is so many different topics that I can talk to you about force, that I couldn't put it into something like a little nice package. Like I put in a nice package about balance, I put in a nice package about weight, even though they were very big topics. So we got force coming up. I just wanted to explain to you that force is going to show you that these are not small topics, but they go into so many details. So force is going to forced me to show you, to tell you that force is a category, balance is a category, energy is a category, tension is a category, pressure is a category, the control is a category. So all of these are categories. So we're expanding, okay? We're expanding what we already know, but it's going to show you that how big this Dance Without Music is, rightfully so. So that's going to be expert 3C. Then after that, we're going into, I want to say stratosphere, to just show you that it's going to be flying way, way out. But if you kept up, if you have been keeping up with these Dance Without Music from the beginning, you will be able to put things in order of your understanding, okay? And that's going to be empty space. Empty space. There's nothing, and that's going to be expert 4. Empty space, you can do nothing without empty space. An example of empty space, and this is like what they use in science too, when they tried to take all the air out of a tube and make everything empty. Well, this one shows you the complexities of empty space and what empty space is. And we're going to use empty space to build something like a stage, because like when you dance, you need an area. And I've seen it so many times, and I researched this too. Whenever someone's dancing or whenever someone's performing, even in as far as being an actor or whatever, they are always in they're in limbo. Okay? But when you dance, you don't want to look like you're in limbo. You want to look like you're in a place. You're in control. And we're going to be you're in control of your space. And you're not just reaching out at things that don't exist. But with Dance Without Music, we're going to set the stage to where we're going to know where we're at. We're going to be so comfortable, but being comfortable entails understanding the space around us, okay? Because okay, and another topic that I didn't go over, which is also a category in itself, is the quadrant. Okay, that's another one that I missed. But this next one, when we go into force, it's going to show you that it's big. It's a world. It's not just little topics. Like I had to lead you to believe that it was something compact so that you can get a mental picture of things and you can relate to things. But I know you can handle it because for those who've started this from the beginning, and they know where to they know how to put this here, put this here, put this here, put this here. Okay, but this is it's going on all of it's going on expert 4. We're finishing up expert 3 and we're doing expert 4, and you know what expert means. So, but like I said, it's all good because those who understand and who actually go through this whole process, they will even if they're hearing this expert, they can see what they're what they're what they're going to do, or the goals, that the road that they have to travel. Another thing too that I want to mention, that understanding these, this is definitely an update now because I've put in too many information, and I am going to talk about which this one is about, is panic attacks, my panic attacks. So what was I getting ready to say? Oh, so so I'm trying to show you that this is just a whole world of things to know. And another thing, one point I want to do before I lose it because it's so big. I wanted to say also, if you start from the beginning, and I'm not trying to get you to get, I'm not trying to get views because it's only a certain amount of people that can do this because it deals with a lot of things. But also knowing from the beginning to now the information, not even if you don't know how to, even if you can't do it, of course you're not going to be able to do everything, but it's going to help you to understand. And also what I'm going to talk about, panic attacks, that's will also help you too, to understand how your system is going to grow. As soon as you start from the beginning, you're in, and you're going to see the levels, okay? I'm almost sure you won't see the levels properly if you start at the wrong point, but you'll see the levels properly. There's also sometimes in pain and everything, but it's not like pain, but you'll understand how the body develops, how the mind and the body develops together. Sometimes it seems like it's painful, but you'll understand about the different kinds of pain. But I'm not talking about pain because I'm taking all the pain out. It's just certain natural things. And this draws me into the panic attacks because it's like a pain, but it's not really a pain. But it just helps you to understand and manage the things that are happening to you. And it's funny because, like I said, like if I look at this camera, it looks like I'm looking over there. So I'm looking here now as if the audience is here. I like to learn about that, but I'm just doing this way. And I learn little by little as far as the YouTubes are concerned, thanks to you all. So everything's to be fine. Now I'm talking about this panic attacks, okay? Now we got all the updates, and I hope that you continue with the program, and I know it's good, and it strengthens me to see that the process of this Dance Without Music. And we will get into dance. I'm making up things so that we can actually do steps and dances in this Dance Without Music while we're learning. But you have to have some kind of dance steps to to have something interesting to watch. Okay, and it will be definitely interesting. Okay, now as far as the attacks is, now we're into the panic attacks. Okay, a lot of people get panic attacks, but not everybody gets panic attacks. Um, thank God. I'm gonna start out how I started getting panic attacks. One good thing that helped me out when I started getting panic attacks was that I told you in earlier YouTubes, I don't know which subjects, maybe it's on a lot of subjects, but I've always was studying, I've always was aware of the process of in, entering information in my mind. I always did that. So it wasn't really a shock to me as far as obtaining a panic attack when I first started getting panic attacks. But I was living in New York City. I wasn't doing very well. I was on welfare because I was trying to do acting. And in New York, I learned acting. I learned oil painting. I got into oil paintings. I did a lot of paintings, which I expressed before. I just loved art, music, uh, dance, like I explained, basically all the arts. That's what New York, I was, that's what I went to New York for. But the most important thing that I got out of New York was I started back going to get my academic degree. And that seems like I went through all this arts thing as far as acting, music, and becoming an artist. But I think the most important thing, which is the thing that I kept up with, and you have to learn what the most important thing to you is academics and learning to me, you know. Um, so I was in New York City, New York, and I was living in Jamaica. This is when I got the panic attacks. I was living in Jamaica. I was on welfare because I didn't have. I think I was I was working, but I was working in a temporary agency, like labor and stuff, but I didn't care because I told you I went to New York to do something with, like everybody else does. Anyway, I ended up in this very depressing like situation. I was living in kind of like it was in Jamaica, Queens, and I was living in this lady's basement. She wasn't really too. I'm not gonna say. Well, I guess I can say that. I mean, the house wasn't too clean. I guess I can say that. But it was in the basement. But it was a nice. I mean, it provided me with a place to live, so that was nice. I was on welfare. I hate to say that, but I was. But I was doing something, and I lived in the basement. It had a basement window, which I mean, at least it had some kind of window in it. It wasn't. It was kind of clean. I mean, it wasn't like dirty. It wasn't slummy dirty, but it was. It was kind of run down, but the neighborhood was all right. And I shared the basement with this guy. This guy on the other side. I had my room. The room was divided by double doors. It was an older house, and it had these double doors that were bound together so that there was no access between the two rooms. The other guy that was living downstairs was definitely an alcoholic. I mean, there was a word for it. uh, I can't really find a word for it because I'm also organizing this because you can't really write it down because it's too much information. But I know it would take him at least a half an hour to get to his room. He was so drunk all the time. But I was kind of attracted to him. Seems like he was really nice. I mean, he was kind of nice. I think we kind of liked each other. When two people are bound in this area together, you find, I mean, if you're a human being, um, a normal human being, you kind of get attracted to each other in some kind of weird way, okay? I mean, sometimes I would kind of, there was a whole kind of ways that you could peek in his room, and I would do that. And it kind of exciting sometimes. I mean, just, I don't know. That's just how I guess we are as human beings. But I didn't have anything to do. I mean, I would walk to work sometime. It took me like 6 hours to walk to work. Like I said, I wasn't working that. I mean, I didn't have much work that I could do. Okay, but I would work I mean, when I had the chance. But it was like under 20 hours. And what I did was, and this is now you have to listen closely, because what I did is I was reading books. I decided to train myself. This was before I went into college to really um, to get my education. I mean, it's years later, maybe 3 years later. 3 years later, I 3 years after that, I decided I was able to get into a situation to where I was going into a community college. But here I was doing it by myself. And I got like maybe three or four books in this room, and I started reading them all at one time. I mean, I would read one, stop, read the other one, stop, read the other one. Maybe it was 3 or 4 books. I'm not really sure, but I remember three of them. But I didn't realize that that was a process. Not just that, but whenever I read, I have this process, because I told you I've been studying all the time, that when I read, I also um, try and understand what I'm doing when I read. I've always done it. But I never did it with reading 3 or 4 books. That's the problem. That's what I was getting into. And I decided to read these books. And like I said, I don't just read, but when I'm reading books, I also figure out what I'm doing while I'm reading. I can do it very easily because I've been doing it for my whole life. But this time I didn't realize that it is something that was going to happen to me, okay? Because I'm taking in so much information. But I was enjoying it, but I was also in a very bad situation. So after that, every day in the morning, I would walk around or either go to work, but with my free time, I would read these 3 or 4 books, fiction books. But the technical thing that I was doing was observing myself. I can enjoy the story totally, 100%. But the thing that was going to affect me was the fact that I'm taking in the information of these 3 books, but I'm also figuring out what I'm doing while I'm reading. Okay, it's a big process. So I did that. And then one time I remember, and this is what got me into the panic attacks, was, okay, so I actually formed a curriculum, which now I know it's a curriculum. A dangerous curriculum, because I didn't know what I was doing. And that's what we have colleges for, and that's what we have universities for. And a lot of people don't realize, but people study about how people study. And they just don't put things together in college or in grammar school. These things are thought out and studied and built upon for centuries and centuries of how to understand topics. But like I said, I did this on my own, and I didn't realize the complications of it. Now I do. So then I was reading these books, and then I had something else I was doing. I added something else. I remember I loved sleeping, relaxing, because you're in a bad situation, you like your dreams or whatever. But I was in a dream, and now I know everything comes together, which I should have when I was relaxing or going to sleep. I should have relaxed and cut everything off, but I wouldn't do that. Then I was in my dream and tried to force myself to continually dream, okay? Because I wasn't really in a good situation, okay? I didn't have any feeling as far as, no, it wasn't really a depression, because I've never really, I mean, I get depressed, but not really, everybody gets depressed, but I wasn't in a depressed state. I've never been in a depressed depressed like, to where it like lingers on or anything like that. But so anyway, I'm trying to set this up, and now I was telling you I added something because I was in a dream, and I remember I was sitting at this beautiful table. I always loved this. I had this beautiful dream of because because this is when my mother was alive. You know, sitting at the table with my mother and my family, and it's just such a nice thing, and I just like that scene, and I wanted to, and I was wanted to create this scene by myself. But as I did it, something clicked. I think it was too much, and I jumped up, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I jumped up out of bed and I started not being able to breathe. I mean, and then I couldn't lay down. And little did I know, I'm going to add this from what I know in retrospect because it makes it more interesting, is I didn't realize that when sometimes when you can't breathe, you're actually breathing, okay? But I was panicking. Now I can see that I was panicking, and that was the birth of my panic attacks. But it was something that I didn't understand, so I called the ambulance on myself. I had a telephone, thank God. They would help you to get a telephone when you're on welfare, which is very important. And I called the ambulance, but I told them not to come to the neighborhood where I was because I didn't want to make a big commotion. And I told them a street that I wanted to meet them on, and that's what I did. So I went to the street. So they said, okay. So I went out, which shows me that I'm all right, actually. I didn't realize that. So anyway, I went to the street where I told the ambulance to come. I told them not to sound the alarm. They didn't sound the alarm. And they were there. It was on an empty street. But it was like, you know, a neighborhood though. And I went inside the ambulance, and I said, I can't breathe. I mean, he asked me, there was two guys there, and he said, do you study a lot? And I go, yeah, I study a lot. And he said, do you read? I go, yeah, I read a lot. And so then he took me to the hospital, okay? The doctors took care of me. There was nothing wrong with me or whatever. But anyway, when I went to the doctor, I noticed that the doctor, I'm making a long story short now, he stated that he thought that I was having asthma attacks, okay? So then, okay, now it's bringing back memories, but I'm gonna relax because it's bringing back really, really a bad time. Okay, so anyway, but I'm gonna finish the story. I'm gonna finish it up until I'm all right. So they gave me the thing for the breathalyzer when you have panic attacks. I mean, not when you have panic attacks, but when you have asthma. So they were thinking that I had asthma. So I started doing the asthma because I didn't know what the panic attacks were. I didn't know that there were panic attacks. But I noticed because there was also a girl who lived in the house also, and we would sit outside and we would have smoke cigarette. But I noticed after I would have the panic attack, I wanted to smoke a cigarette. So that was telling me also that it wasn't asthma. And I would talk to her. We had night conversation. There was another girl who lived in the house that I lived that was there. And later on, after that, because when I found out that that it wasn't asthma. So then they suggested that I go into some kind of check to get checked out by a psychiatrist. Okay, and a therapist. Okay, so I went to the psychiatrist, and I went to psychiatrist first, and he talked to me, and it seemed to him like I was studying too much or something like that, or I was overloading, I guess. But I guess he didn't realize that I did this all the time. But he gave me some medication. I don't know what it was, but it begins with a D. That's as far as I can remember, I think, but I'm not sure. But what happened, okay, I'll explain that, and then I'll explain what the therapist did. So I took the medication, and then I went to the therapist. They also had a therapist. I only saw the psychiatrist once. He was the one that prescribed the medication. And I don't want to. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside as far as medication is concerned. Then I went to the therapist, which was really good. It seemed as though the therapist is what I really needed, because they would tell me about relaxing and just relaxing. And I think I'm going to finish this one because this one is so big. I didn't realize it was going to be so big. So now I think I'm going to end this one, and I'm going to tell you the rest of the story later on, because it's really, really intense. And as far as my panic attacks, this is going to be my panic attack, my panic attacks, um, part, I hate to say part one, so I won't say part one, I'll just say A. And also updates on Expert 3C and Expert 4, because I didn't realize this subject was such a big, intense subject. So we'll leave it at that for now, and then we'll go into something, and then I'll finish this my panic attacks. I think it's going to be next week. Thank you very much, and I hope you follow along with this one.